Let's review 2023. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in 2023. Now the previous year I actually did both my least favourite and favourite books from 2022 in one video. However, 2023 I had a few misses. So I'm actually going to split this video into two parts. The first part, today's video, is going to be about my least favourite books, which I will get into in a minute. And the next video is going to be my favourite reads of 2023. I also thought I might briefly mention other things I did that were book related. One being that I finally finished my catalogue of all my books. I did not get a specific program for that. I basically used Calibre, which is an ebook manager, and just added a tag noting whether a book was a hardcover, a paperback, or a trade paperback. And I believe it is completely up to date, though knowing me, I might have missed one or two. I actually now take photographs of all the new books that I buy or bring into the house so that I can update my catalogue and have it complete. But I suspect some things have slipped through the cracks. Perhaps in a couple of years I might go through it again, but I certainly don't want to do that now. Still, it's a big accomplishment for me that they are finally all catalogued and that I can just look there and see what I do own and what I don't own, because sometimes I do forget. The other thing that I really wanted to do was find a place to put all the books that I want to read, like my TBR shelf. Because up to now, all my books that I was thinking of reading were on this shelf or that shelf and just scattered all over the house. I know that some book YouTubers have this trolley, which I don't like. I also find that it doesn't work as well for me because I am in a wheelchair scooter, so I don't have the same kind of mobility. And though I've looked at a lot of different solutions, it was only when my friend Jacqueline was talking about buying this circular bookshelf that I thought, that might be perfect for me. So I did. I bought this tall circular bookshelf that actually turns very easily, and I am completely and utterly in love with it. It isn't made out of wood. I think it's MDF, but it has been stained so well that it is reminiscent of wood, which matches all my bookcases and my study desk, etc. And I just love this thing. It is one of the best buys I've made in a long time. It also doesn't take up a lot of space, so I found a little nook for it. And now whenever I'm uncertain as to what I want to read, I just turn this thing and find a book. It fits, I think, roughly around 120 to 150 books. I haven't put any books on the bottom shelf because my puppy Cleo is not to be trusted. She has already destroyed 3 books, 2 of them hardcovers, and I was just worried she might grab them. Plus, I think the bottom shelf might be hard for me to access, but I can access every other shelf. So I love this thing, and I think it looks fantastic. A great buy if you have limited space, and yet it does fit a lot of books. I have so many bookshelves in my house that I have no free walls. I was considering having a custom built bookshelf made in my library, floor to ceiling, but I'm actually looking to move. I need a bit more space. Not necessarily for the books, though that is one consideration. And as a result, I decided I'm not going to build anything here because who knows, it may not fit in the new place. So this circular shelf has really fulfilled a need for me to have all my books that I want to read in one place. So that, I guess, is the two major things I did in relation to books and reading. As for how many books I read, I think it is around 94. I never put a number on how many books I need to read in a specific period of time. Perhaps it's because I've always seen reading as a joy, as a pleasure, rather than a chore. And I think if I set a number on it, it will feel like a chore, like I've got to get through this amount of books. I don't care. It really matters more to me whether I'm enjoying what I'm reading. Yeah. And out of those 94 books, they were predominantly novels, full-length novels. I think I only read a couple that were short stories or collections of short stories. And it was a mix of genres, which I'm really pleased about. There was some contemporary, there was some science fiction, fair bit of fantasy because that is always my favourite genre, but also a lot of mysteries as well, murder mysteries mainly. And of course there were classics. I have been trying to read one a month. I don't always do it, but I did read a few classics last year and I'm content with that. So when I say that there were a few books that I did not enjoy last year, I guess compared to the total, it's not that many, though it was more than the previous year. We all have misses, right? Sometimes a book that a lot of people love, you may hate. It is not because the book is necessarily bad, it's just because we all have different tastes. I mean, we can't expect everyone, for example, to have blue as their favourite colour. It's just not realistic. And it's the same with books, I feel. All right, I'm going to start with Stephen King, actually. I usually love all of his books. Not always equally. Some of them I don't like as much. There were two of his that I read which just didn't hit the mark for me. The first was The Colorado Kid, which the show Haven was based on very loosely. I didn't enjoy this book for one reason mainly, and that is because it was written in slang or with an accent, I guess. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it just became so tedious trying to work out what these characters were saying that it really broke my flow during the reading process, and I found myself getting very annoyed with it. I don't mind if you do a few words here and there, but it does become tiring when it is the whole conversation, and this book was predominantly dialogue. Yeah, I got really tired of it very, very quickly. So this was not one I loved. No, it was a hard case crime book as well. The second book was Later, also a hard case crime. I really enjoyed it, though I got tired of being told that it's a horror story. King always writes horror basically, but the ending, something that happened at the end, just put me off this book completely. King doesn't always nail the endings, but I really disliked that ending. I thought, no, it's just spoiled this whole book for me. It was also a very short book, and perhaps that is why I didn't love it as much, because I do love his really long books because you have time to get to know the characters so well. You become extremely invested in them. I didn't feel as invested in these characters. A least favourite read, and this was not necessarily a bad book overall, is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I was really confused when I was reading this. I thought, this is bizarre. It had a cat that actually talked, and I thought, oh, is it fantasy? Is it a mystery? I went into it thinking it was a murder mystery, but really it was more a psychological study, I guess, on the main character. And that just wasn't what I was looking for. I also did not like the ending in this at all. I thought it is unrealistic. Plus, there was a very unreliable narrator in this, which really bothered me because we were inside the narrator's head. And whilst, yes, people can lie to themselves, to lie about actual facts to herself just didn't seem real to me, and it really bugged the crap out of me, actually. I didn't mind the writer's style. I just didn't like this book all that much, and I guess I'm uncertain if I want to try any more. Though it wasn't a terrible book, I can't say it was badly written, just not to my taste. I should probably mention I have already spoken about most of these books in my seasonal wrap-up videos. The next book is a classic which I did not enjoy, and that was The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I haven't read much by him. This was only, I think, my first novel. I have read a short story collection, and I was just unimpressed. Unimpressed with the writing. I found the characters really dull and boring. Really. They were directionless. They meant to be, I think, the lost generation after World War One. I just found their interactions tedious, and there was a female character that I absolutely loathed. She was beautiful, and it seemed everyone forgave her any bad behaviour, and I found that really hard to swallow, actually. Overall, when I finished it, I thought, I don't get it. I don't get why he's considered such a great writer. Was it good? I'd say it was average for me anyway, but it was definitely one of my least favourites. And it's made me reluctant to read any more, though I might read more by Hemingway in the future. I just don't know yet. But that was really the only classic I didn't love that I read last year. The next one is The Rook by Daniel O'Malley, an Australian author. I was so excited about this, and yet in the end, I did not like this book at all, and I have zero interest in reading any more in this series anyway. It's not that O'Malley is a bad writer, but he used this device of letters that I absolutely hated. It was fine at the beginning. I thought, oh, it's only going to be a couple, but it was throughout the whole book that kept interrupting the flow. They didn't read like letters. They read more like an author writing rather than an actual letter from one person to another. This device was also overutilized for info dumps. It just kept giving us all this information rather than letting us learn it as we went. Initially, I didn't dislike the main character, and the premise of this book was really good. It is about a woman who wakes up with no memory of her former life, surrounded by dead bodies. And then she finds a letter in her pocket from her former self. Like I said, a very intriguing premise. I just did not like the execution. And the character just degenerated, I think, throughout the book to become this very annoying, almost teenager who I didn't find believable at all. So unfortunately, The Rook is not one I would recommend to others. Because I was keen to try more murder mysteries, I started reading Ngaio Marsh last year. The first one is A Man Lay Dead. I was not impressed with the first one whatsoever. The resolution, or how the crime occurred, was, in my opinion, utterly ridiculous. The writing also seemed very self-conscious and not very smooth, which is to be expected with the first book, but I was not impressed, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to read any more, though everyone or every review I've read or article I've read recommends Ngaio Marsh. I have persevered since then, and her main character, Roderick Allen, has grown on me as the books have progressed, but I would say that at least the first few I don't think are very good. I did find with time that she does improve in her mysteries and in also laying enough clues for us to try to work it out, though they are not always easy to predict, and sometimes it's because there aren't enough clues. And the other murder mystery writer I tried, classic, is Dorothy L. Sayers. And I will say that her main character, Lord Peter Wimsey, is a pompous ass at times and very hard to swallow. I think Sayers was more interested in how the murder was committed rather than who committed the murder. And Wimsey can be intolerable at times because he is extremely pompous. He is the son of a duke, and I also think that the author is, what can I say, a little snooty at times. There was one book she wrote which I absolutely hated with a passion, and that was Clouds of Witness, I think it is. It was not the first, it might have been the fifth or sixth of hers. It was about Lord Peter Wimsey's older brother, who is the Duke, being arrested for a murder, and just Sayers' obvious admiration of elitism, of the privileged treatment given to anyone with a title in England, just bothered me no end. I have, though, persevered with Sayers because she is considered such a good writer. I just don't agree. And thankfully, I haven't come across any more really privileged attitudes in her other books. Otherwise, I think I would have stopped reading them. I really don't know why I'm reading them. Yeah, ultimately, I don't know why I'm continuing. Perhaps because I'm missing Agatha Christie and I just want something from that period. I don't know. The Crime at Black Dudley by Marjorie Allingham, another of the golden age of detective writers from the 20s. I did not love this one. It read more as an intrigue rather than a murder mystery, though there was a murder that took place. It was all about these characters being stuck in this castle with this gang of thieves who were after something. I can't remember what it was. And I did not find it compelling at all. The writing wasn't bad. I didn't hate her writing, but her main character, who features in all her future books, was such a buffoon. I just found him boring and silly. Yeah, silly is the right word. So I wasn't very impressed with this book, and I don't know if I want to try any more. From what I can tell, I think they are mainly intrigues, like spy thrillers or something like that, rather than an actual murder mystery, which is what I enjoy. The Tea Ladies by Amanda, and I could get this wrong, it's either Johnson or Hampson. This is an Australian author. I bought this because it reminded me of the Richard Osman Thursday Murder Club books. The cover did. And I don't know if people know this, but we have, and I think it's also an English tradition, where we used to have a tea lady with a trolley who would go around, say, in the hospitals or in offices, making tea and coffee for people. It's not something you see often now, but I have seen it, and I thought this could be kind of interesting, except that it was unbelievable that the tea ladies actually solved this kind of murder. It just didn't ring true that people would spill all their guts to the tea lady. It's just not realistic, I don't think. There were some interesting elements to it. It was set in the 60s, where there was an incident in Australia which caused a bit of a scandal, where I think an English model wore a miniskirt. But other than that, there was just not much that appealed to me in this mystery. Also, something that happens to a main character was telegraphed so early on that it was not intriguing at all. There were a lot of things that I didn't like about this book. There were some Russians involved and some Russian mafia, and it was just, too much I think she tried to pack into it, and it just didn't work for me. I think this author doesn't write a lot of murder mysteries. I think this might have been her first, which was kind of obvious. Ultimately, I was not impressed by this and not interested in reading any more if she does do any more in this series. This next book is going to be a bit of a surprise to some. I have been absolutely loving the Discworld series, but I did not like The Last Continent. That one was meant to be, I guess, a spoof on Australia, and I think if you're not Australian, it might have worked, but as an Australian, I tended to get a little offended at times at some of the very obvious cliches that Pratchett include about Australians. Perhaps I'm being oversensitive, I don't know. I also have gotten really bored with the character of Rincewind. He is now no longer a character I enjoy, and whenever I do find him in a book, I tend to try to quickly get through that part to anything else because he is just the same as he was in the very beginning, and I'm just not finding him funny anymore. There were some really good parts in this though. There was the Unseen University professors. They were hysterical. They have become now some of my favourite characters from the series. But the Australian cliches was just too heavy-handed for me. Yeah, I think if there was a bit less of it, I would have enjoyed this a lot more. I hate to include it because I've loved pretty much every other Discworld book, but just not this one. Yeah. Another book that was definitely one of my least favourites was The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. I was so looking forward to reading this, and I did not enjoy it at all. It is a story within a story, or a mystery within a mystery. It is about an editor who receives a manuscript of a murder that takes place, I think, in the 60s. There is a lot of homages to Agatha Christie, very deliberate, but I just found this written in a way that came across as smug. I also felt the author thought he was smarter than he really is, and I was not invested at all in the editor's story, though I didn't mind the mystery, which I think actually was in the 50s, not 60s, though some things that the author included were not believable for that time period, I don't think, anyway. But the editor, she was such a bland, colourless character who I was utterly bored with, and I found completely unbelievable as an amateur detective. I'm sorry, but I just don't think people would be talking to an editor about their private lives. And she was asking some really intrusive questions. Plus, she behaved so stupidly at the end that I almost threw the book across the room. So this was not one I enjoyed at all. It was one of my least favourites from last year, and I will definitely not be reading any more in this series because I can't stand this editor. I can't even remember her name. Yeah. And I know this is not a popular opinion. Many people loved this book. I wasn't one of them, I'm afraid. Now, the last three books I'm going to talk about are DNFs, or almost DNFs. My least favourites, obviously, because I am usually not the type to DNF a book. I will generally finish it. I will force myself to finish a book even if I'm not enjoying it. So I think it says a lot that at least two of these I have given a hard DNF to. The first is Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. This was an author that was recommended if you like cozy mysteries set in the 20s, but she is a contemporary writer, and there was a little bit of revisionist history. But I think what really bothered me about this one, and I read at least a third of it, is that the main character was a psychologist and detective in the 20s, and yet any sexism she might have faced was not addressed. And I thought this would have been a big thing, to have a woman educated and a detective in a predominantly male role, and yet she doesn't talk about that at all. It was just so often swept under the carpet as just a minor irritant, and that just really bugged me that it wasn't addressed. The other thing was I found it very repetitive. This character would investigate something, and then we'd have to hear about her writing all her notes about it. Wow, I found this so tedious and so boring. And there was all these hints about this tragic romance she had, and I thought, oh no, we're going to have a flashback, and I couldn't bear it. So I gave up before we got to the flashback, and I don't regret it. And I have zero interest in reading this or I think, anything else by this author at this point anyway. This was just too dragged out, and we didn't even touch on the mystery, and yet I was more than a third of the way in the book. So yeah, that one was also one of my least favourite reads from last year. And the other one, I only tried in December. I've owned this for ages, and I got sucked in by a sales assistant telling me I will love it, and for some reason I never picked it up. I think I knew I wasn't going to like it. Ever since I've started rereading and doing more research about fantasy, I've realised that this author is most likely not going to be for me, though she is very, very popular. And the book is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I DNF'd it after 12 pages. Yeah, which is unheard of for me, which I don't think I've ever done. But that was more than enough to show me this book was definitely not for me. It read as a romance, as a young adult romance. It read as a romance that was pretending to be a fantasy because it involved some fantastical elements, and I found it utterly tedious. I also disliked the character intensely. She was arrogant and conceited, kept telling us how great she was as an assassin at 17, which is unbelievable, and yet not showing us. And as soon as a love triangle was introduced and I met these male characters, I thought, oh my God, I cannot bear it, no way. So yeah, that one, I can't say is my least favourite because I haven't read the whole thing, but it was very obvious that it is everything I don't want in fantasy. So that one has gone on the shelf to be sold or given away. I don't know yet. And the last one is The Ships of Magic by Robin Hobb. I slogged through the first half and I have read half. I do want to finish it just so I can say, okay, I finished it. What do I think about it? However, at this point, it has languished on my shelves for several months, and I'm not sure when I'll get back to it, if I do, but I found this one really boring. The only thing that kept me going throughout this book was I liked her world. She has made it intriguing enough for me to want to learn more about it, but I can't stand any of the characters. And it's all about family squabbles, about characters I don't care about. I think if I had learned to like at least one, I would have enjoyed part of the family squabbles, but I didn't. I didn't like any of the characters. Perhaps I'll learn to like them more once I finish the book. I don't know. And I still don't know if I'm going to finish it. I know a lot of people love Robin Hobb just like they love Sarah J. Maas, but some authors are just not to your taste. And this is the second Robin Hobb book that I have kind of left in the middle because I just got bored with it and didn't enjoy it. The first was Assassin's Apprentice, which I read many, many years ago. I even own several other books by this author. But until I finish Ships of Magic, and I do intend to at some point, though when I don't know, I'm not going to touch those. I suspect she's just not going to be an author for me, no matter how much other people might love her. Yeah. So as you can see, there were quite a few misses. There were probably others that I didn't like as much as other books, but they didn't fall within this list because these are the ones that I just really didn't enjoy. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Now, of course, I want to hear what are your least favourite reads from 2023. And also, what do you think of my list? I know you may not agree, but that's okay. We're allowed to disagree, right? And you can let me know down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. You can expect the second part of this video very shortly, where I will talk about my favourite reads of 2023. Well, thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, as it helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.